We'd like to welcome each and every individual to Voices of Integrity podcast for marriages. And we have gone through the previous one was the amiable personality. So that's the individual that, chose the ball or things conflict with others. And so that's a really good podcast. So hopefully you've enjoyed that. So which of these four shapes would you tend to like the most? A cube, a pyramid, a wavy line, or a ball? A cube, a pyramid, wavy line, or a ball? So we tend to like other people who are like us, and we tend to fall in love with people who are opposite of us. And so we went through the amiable, and we call that, we'll say that's the lowest frequency. It's not a bad thing. It's like in science, low frequencies are going to be radio waves. High frequencies are going to be X-rays or gamma rays. And an X-ray is not better or worse than a radio wave. It's just very different. So don't interpret high or low as good or bad. It's not that at all. And so the amiable is going to tend to be a lower frequency than the analytic, than the expressive, than the driver. And so today we're going to be talking about the analytic personality, and you can join the live GPS for sure there too. We have a couple participants or guests on today, and they may jump in and participate and ask questions, which is great, or they may just sit in the background, which is fine as well. Welcome. Live individuals are always invited to participate in live podcasts. Those are fun. And so anyways, so if you chose the cube or out of order, one of your greatest strengths might be like to dot your I's, cross your T's, make sure things are done properly in order. One of your weaknesses might be you like to dot your I's, cross your T's, make sure things are done properly in order. So our greatest strength is our greatest weakness, and our greatest weakness is our greatest strength. Misapplied is taking strength and carrying it too far. In birth order, often the firstborn is going to be the analytic, but not always. Lastborn or thirdborn will often be the expressive. And then the middle children will be the driver or the amiables. Now, Rosanna and I have 7 children, 8 grandchildren. It seems like that the core personality is kind of genetic, birth order type of thing, how they're born. Like our youngest son was very active. Tim was very active in Rosanna's womb. So we're like, he's an aggressive child. And yep, he's got a lot of driver in him. So the analytic will tend to fall in love with the expressive personality. So we tend to like other people who are like us, and we tend to fall in love with people who are opposite of us. And then there's the chameleon personality, which we'll do a podcast on that. That's kind of the, all of them. They're a combination of everything. In the podcast website, there's also some other cool things about mental health based on personalities. And then there's things about peace and harmony and a bunch of different things there. And then it talks about the quantum feeling model. And there's flawless thinking and how various personalities are vulnerable. And so there's some really cool things that are in here. So Rosanna and I are both, both of us are analytic. So let's say it's probably my secondary personality. I would be a driver primary, although I test on the geo and the pain equally. But I would probably be driver. I tend to show up more as that. And Rosanna would be more amiable and a secondary of analytic. And so Rosanna, if somebody is married, their marriage, and they're an analytic, and they're listening to this podcast, and they're married to an expressive, what advice would you give to them?
I would probably say give the expressive some room, because they're not going to be as precise in what they do. They're not going to clean like you want them to. They're going to want to have more fun. They're going to want to have, let's go outside and do something, versus make sure everything's cleaned up before they leave. So I think being more flexible with them, giving them some space.
And the expressive might want to get into fights, so
just to get some attention.
some attention and, have, some fun TJJS. We'll have a session or two on that at some point in the future. And so just to make up. And so, why is it that we are attracted to opposites? I think there's something innately inside of us that know that we're missing something. So we're naturally drawn to something. And so with I think Analytic knows that they need somebody that's going to push them outside their comfort zone, somebody that's going to challenge them, somebody that's going to go and be more social so they can feel these things are missing in their life. I think the expressive knows innately that they better settle down. They've got to have some parameters. They need to go ahead and have somebody to balance the book, somebody to have some decency and order. And so we tend to draw into people, we fall in love with people who are opposite of us often. And what draws us to them is the very thing that will push us apart. And so, what advice would you give, Rosanna, to the expressive personality that's married to the analytic?
Listen to what they really want. Try not to antagonize. I would say give them some, room to want to have some perfections. Ask them what they're looking for and try to meet it as best they can. I would say don't explain yourself on why you do things. But then again, analytics like explanation. So that's a good question. It could be both.
I think analytics maybe like to explain themselves, but may not like when other people explain things to them.
You might be right on that.
So,
what happens? We're both secondary analytics. What's wrong with something's messed up there?
What does that mean?
It means that I like to explain myself, but you don't like explanations. So how does that work?
And I don't like to explain myself. I think people that are smart are going to go ahead and come to my conclusion. No, I'm just joking, like for all the analytics amiable out there. I mean, but there's some truth to it. It's like, do you really think through things? And the analytic does think they think through things. They really do. But they think through the details, but often miss the big picture. They often frustrate because their view on life is ready, aim, check, 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 check. The analytic often has high ego. They have a hard time admitting that they're wrong. And they have enough data to make it look like they're right, even if they are wrong. And so they have a hard time changing. Is that true with all personalities? I'd have to say yes. It's hard. And if you're an analytic, amiable personality, like Rosanna is, amiable, analytic, amiable, not only are you going to have a lot of data, but you're going to be really super stubborn too.
But you want people to like you too. So it's hard to go ahead and get, if you're analytic, you want things your way, but getting it your way is hard when you're an amiable. Unless you're stubborn.
Well, yeah, it's a great question, Rosanna. So she's trying to spice this up. She's teasing and taunting me. We do this podcast on Fridays, and so it's our date night. So she likes to spice things up a lot. So it's interesting that you say that, Rosanna. So you find that it's hard for you to get things?
Not from you necessarily.
Or
but
from anybody?
Unless you're using, I don't know. I think you and I play the good cop, bad cop quite a bit. And I
which,
think
which do we switch off on those?
sometimes,
Really?
yeah.
Like, how many times in our 39 years of marriage do you think you've been bad cop?
Uh,
I've got my
probably
number.
5.
5. Okay. Well, yours was about 500% more than mine, but I'll give you 5. So maybe, I'm not sure when those 5 are, and I wouldn't ask for any data, even though you're analytic and give me a lot of data. I wouldn't ask for data and so I think amiable doesn't have a hard time getting what they want for 2 reasons. One is they're married to the driver and they let the driver just do the hard, messy stuff. They're the ones that's liked and loved, and everybody thinks you're a great mom, a great wife. I mean, how many people have joked about how hard it is, how hard it must be for me to be married to you?
Quite a few.
Really? There,
I
there-
No,
have.
the opposite is true. Usually they're saying it's hard for me to be married to you.
right, that's what I'm saying. Is there one person that has said, they feel bad for me to be married to you?
Um,
Maybe not.
yeah, maybe not.
Yeah. But everybody, their brother, sister, aunt, uncle, everybody says to you how hard it must be to be married to you. Me.
Yeah.
I think the amiable, you know, they're great at, when you look at these things here, the, feeling model, the quantum feeling model, I think the amiable, no, obviously I'd never be mean to amiables, so this is not being mean to amiables at all, and so it's weird because when my wife says not, then it just means she's not. But when I say not, nobody buys into my not. They're like, no, you're being mean. But I said I wasn't. Yeah, but you are. It's like, really? So it seems to me that the amiable is very entitled because they're nice to everybody. And so everybody should be nice to them.
That's an expectation, yes.
Yeah, entitled. Like, I'm nice to everybody. Are you really nice? Are you nice? Like, and then self-righteous, because the amiable is obviously nicer than everybody else is. So obviously they're more righteous than the other person. And who always gets picked on? The amiable. They always get taken advantage of. So it's almost like built within the amiable to be entitled, self-righteous, and victims. Now, if you're amiable and you don't have a good sense of humor, you're probably ticked at me. You're probably angry and upset. But that's not a very nice thing to do, to be angry and upset. I'm joking. I mean, am I? I don't know. Like, this is where it's interesting because often what we think in a marriage is true is not. My dad was very strong, amiable, analytic, amiable, analytic. And after 50 years of marriage, I said to my mom, I said, man, dad just bugs the living daylights out of me. He's so stubborn. Like, he's not stubborn. I'm like, are you kidding, mom? It's like, no. Then a month later, she says, I was looking at your dad, and man, is he stubborn? I'm like, right? And so often we don't see, and the amiable is like a chameleon. So they kind of adapt to whatever environment they are. So if you're an amiable analytic, for sure, you're a super nice and smart person. And that's what you tell everybody else how nice and smart they are. They tell you how nice and smart you are, and everybody feels good. But is that really growing? I don't know. You could be an analytic driver like myself, where you want things perfect and fast in that order. People don't like people like me. They like people like Rosanna. Don't like people like me. Why? Because people don't like to see what's really true about themselves. Or you could be an analytic expressive like my, youngest brother, Ken, or like Tom Coons, and you have a million ideas and you want to do them all perfect. Well, that's some mental illness, all around it. Like, how do you do a million ideas, perfect? And so when we look at marriage, there was, my dad, I think I'd mentioned in the previous podcast, my dad was a pastor. And so, I did a lot of volunteer and marriage counseling and stuff. And there was this couple through Life Masteries Institute that was having marriage problems. And so they said, "Hey, could you have a couple sessions with them?" I said, "Not a problem. Just do it as volunteer work." And so I had 2 half-an-hour sessions, and they went from a 1 and a 2 in their marriage up to an 8, 9, and 10 in their marriage in 2, in 2 sessions. And it's from an understanding of the personalities. Um, the pastor of the church that my dad started, Dale Williams, he took over, and he invited me to come out and help a couple. And and he says, "Hey, Mark has some ideas. They're having financial difficulty." And so each one of the 4 personalities view money in a different way based on their personality in large part. I went out there, and before we got started, Dale said, he says, "Hey, Mark's here and he's going to talk about finances and marriage. But before he does that, he might be able to help you out with some personality stuff." Because he speaks, he's an international speaker and author. He's traveled all around the world on it. So he might give you some insight. So I asked him, which of these 4 shapes, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which of these 4 things cause the most frustration, 1, 2, 3, and 4? They answered him. I said, "Well, this might be your marriage." And I went to lay it out. And I said, this might be why you fell in love with her, and this is why you have so much conflict now. This is why you absolutely adored him, and this is why you hate him now. So I went through that whole thing, and Dale, at the end, when we left the house, we were out on the front porch, and Dale says, "I've been cynical of this personality stuff." I'm like, "Uh-huh." And he's like, "I've never seen anything like it. It's not like you told them something that they've never heard before from a marriage counseling. It's just you didn't have any information. You just went right in and told them about themselves in the marriage." Very, very powerful, very potent. And so this, I think, the first 2 years of our marriage were really rough. And that's when I was introduced to this. And so it was really rough. And so the very things that drew me to Rosanna pushed me away from her. The very things that drew her to me to her to me, were the very things that pushed her apart. So understanding how we're wired, and then having wisdom and discernment on those things. Anything else, Rosanna, or others that you'd like to cover, or questions you have?
I just thought this was really cool to kind of see the difference in perspectives between one personality to another between you and Rosanna.
Yeah, it is. And when you look at the mental health stuff, so the Analytic, their biggest, their challenges is this despair. And then the driver is anger, the expressive is foolishness, and the amiable is fear. Specifically in the Analytic, pride, disassociation, major depression, bipolar. The driver is defiant, poor conduct, disruptive, sexual disorder, oppositional, physical abuse. The expressive is narcissism, ADD, ADHD, addictions, explosive drama, eating disorder, obsessive compulsive. And the amiable, panic attacks, passive aggressive, stress, post-traumatic, PTSD, anxiety, and social phobias. And if you're like a chameleon personality, like if you're an Analytic, maybe expressive in one personality and a driver amiable in another, you're a chameleon personality. That's where your biggest disorder is the borderline personality disorder, or BPD, which is a real thing. and so it's like Tom Kuntz was funny, good friend of mine. He and I co-authored a book, Community Business Partnerships. And when he saw this, he said, "What if you have all of these?" And that's pretty much, that's pretty much what an inner quadrant has. And so, but each of these have strengths too. Like every single one of these, that's a weakness, mental disorder, every one of them have a mental strength. And so it's our strength becoming our weakness, I believe, that creates mental health issues. So that's another whole topic. Lots of cool things that we'll be discussing in future podcasts. Like us on Facebook. And then you can go ahead in here, somewhere in the website here, questions and experiences. So yeah, you can go ahead and share something on Facebook about us. You can also go ahead and get a question to us. And so, hey, I have a question in marriage about this. Again, no question is off topic. Like, you can ask us anything. We won't share that it's coming from you. So we'll just say, hey, one of the podcast listeners shared this, or probably more than one would share it. And so make sure you share this with other people. It's pretty cool when we understand this. After we were introduced this, 2 years into our marriage, Rosanna was 19, I was 20 when we got married in college. And after we were introduced this, it helped me to understand that it wasn't Rosanna being evil to me and trying to destroy me. It wasn't that I was a terrible husband. It wasn't that our marriage was terrible. It was just we were so different, and we hadn't been prepared or trained for that difference of perspective. And so it was just hard. And that's why both Rosanna and I, after 39 years of marriage, have such a passion to do this podcast and share it with as many people as we can. Not just people who are married, but people who are looking at getting married, because I think, how cool would have it been if we would have been aware of this before we got married? And so hopefully this has been helpful to each one of you. If you have any questions on anything we covered today, feel free to connect with the individual who invited you to participate in today's podcast, or you can call toll-free 888-230-2300, outside the U.S. 630-393-9909. And always remember, we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. Have an amazing day. Bye-bye.